The Jihaad Campbell selection is proof of another step Howie Roseman has taken in his evolution as a general manager. I'll tell you why coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast.
You are Locked On Eagles, your daily Philadelphia Eagles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We thank you so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. I'm your host, Louie DiBiase. On today's edition of the show, we're going to get into how Howie Roseman continues to evolve as a GM, plus winners and losers of the 2025 NFL Draft. Today's episode is brought to you by the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. Stay tuned for the Armada draft pick of the week later on in the show. So the 2025 NFL Draft has concluded, and I think the first selection the Eagles made with the 31st pick in the first round, selecting Alabama linebacker Jihaad Campbell, is just another step in Howie Roseman's evolution as a general manager. And let me explain why. So every offseason, and you guys know, I've done a few shows about this every single year, Howie Roseman tries to do things differently every offseason than he normally does. At least with one move, he tries to go against the grain. You know, zig when the rest of the league zags. You guys have probably heard these sayings on the show over and over again, this lingo, right? Zigging when the rest of the league zags. I've said finding the market inefficiency, tapping into an overcorrection from the NFL, just doing things different, finding styles of players that you don't have, evolving with the game, being one step ahead. Because if you're one step behind, like if you're copying another team on a trend, odds are you're too late. So be a trendsetter, not a trend follower. And I think Howie Roseman has been so good at that, and it's been a main part of 2 championships in 8 years, 3 Super Bowl appearances as well in 8 years. And I was speculating how he would do that this offseason, and I didn't really see anything yet. But I think the Jihaad Campbell pick is the move. Like last year, it was with Saquon Barkley. Howie Roseman had never drafted or signed a running back to a big deal or, spent a first-round pick on a running back. He spent a 2 on Miles Sanders in 2019, but that was like the best he's ever done at running back. Normally, he did not invest in that position a lot, but the NFL didn't either, so he got Saquon Barkley for cheap. That was him zigging when the rest of the league zags. That was him evolving as a GM. I guess you could say this year, he did evolve in free agency. He paid a linebacker top 5 money, so that's something different. Paying Zach Bond, he would not have done that a few years ago. But I think the Jihaad Campbell move is like the move of his evolution. It's like the Saquon move of last offseason or this offseason, even over signing Zach Bond. Because when you look at the Eagles' past, they have great pass rushers. They always have, right? They've had great inside linebackers before. Zach Bond, Nigel Bradham. Jordan Hicks was great for a little bit. D'Amico Ryans, Michael Kendricks was solid. TJ Edwards was very underrated. Jeremiah Trotter Jr. back in the day. They've had great traditional linebackers. They've had great traditional pass rushers on the defensive line. But they've never had this kind of piece before. What Jihaad Campbell presents. Like this is, I saw somebody call him a Swiss Army knife from hell on X this weekend. And I can't stop thinking about that analogy when I watch his tape, because that's exactly who Jihaad Campbell is. He's 6'3", over 230 pounds, an elite wingspan for a linebacker. He runs a 4.52, so he's as fast as some wide receivers at the NFL level. Like, this is a do-it-all player. He came into Alabama, recruited as an edge rusher, had 5 sacks last year with the Crimson Tide, but it was as a stand-up linebacker. Like, he would drop back into zone coverage and play really well. He was great flowing to the football, crashing down on the run game. Jihaad Campbell is a Swiss Army knife from hell. He's a do-it-all jackal, a positionless player. He's a shapeshifter. And the Eagles have not had, Howie Roseman has never really had that kind of player before. He's had versatile pieces. Like, he's had a Malcolm Jenkins at safety that can come down into the box. He can play slot corner. He can play deep safety. But he's never had a pass rusher, linebacker, two-way kind of player that has the ability to do it all. A Micah Parsons, if you will. And that is the exact analogy or comparison that Howie Roseman made in his press conference after selecting Campbell when discussing what his ceiling is. Like, he talked about Abdul Carter for the Giants can be that kind of player. Micah Parsons is that kind of player for the Dallas Cowboys. They've never really had that kind of guy, just a free roaming pass rusher that an offense every snap is going to have to watch. Where's Jihaad Campbell? And he's number 11 in Alabama. Like, where is number 11? For the Eagles, not sure what number he's going to be. But they've never had a player like this that's going to line up on the edge. He's going to line up at linebacker. He's going to show blitz and then maybe drop back, where every single play the offense has no idea what he's going to do or where he's going to line up. And that gives quarterback fits. And they haven't had that kind of guy before. I was watching his tape, and it got me so excited that every single play that I watched this weekend, I kept asking myself, where the hell is Jihaad Campbell? I had to keep my eyes, before pre-snap, I'm looking for number 11 because he's lining up somewhere different. I can't just say, oh, there he is. He's middle linebacker. Sometimes he's on the edge. Then he's on the other side of the edge. He's playing. He's like overhanging in the slot. That's so exciting to me. And it's, again, a continuous evolution of Howie Roseman's GM game. Like, he has never brought somebody in like this before, and he's trying to evolve this Eagles roster, get different types of players, stay up to date with what the NFL is requiring of your personnel. Like, the NFL right now, with how versatile and explosive offensive weapons are, you need guys like Jihaad Campbell. I mean, Howie Roseman said it over and over again this weekend. He kept talking about range and speed on the second level of the defense, like wingspan, speed, range, tackling. You need those kind of guys. And you have a lot of them now. You have Zach Bond, you have Nakobe Dean, Cooper DeJean, Andrew Makuba, Reed Blankenship, now Jihaad Campbell. Those are the kind of guys you need in the NFL, and I feel like the Eagles defense for years and years didn't have enough of these players. But Campbell's a different type of it, and they haven't had this guy. I don't know who the right comparison would be in Eagles terms. Like, who's the closest thing they've had to Jihaad Campbell? I mean, Hassan Reddick, I guess, in a way, but Hassan Reddick didn't play stand-up linebacker. Like, Jihaad Campbell, I think, can be, and it's why I hate the back-and-forth conversation I saw after, Thursday night, after the pick. Is he an edge? Is he a linebacker discussion? Like, I hate that conversation because I think he has an elite ceiling at both. Like, I don't want to put him in a box. Roseman said it himself during his presser. I don't know why I called him Roseman. That's weird. His name's Howie. We call him Howie here. That was weird. I apologize. He kept saying, don't put this player in a box because reporters were trying to get out of him. What do you see him doing at the next level? I truly think sometimes players, coaches, GMs say they're versatile, but they end up most of the time really just doing one thing, mastering one craft. And I think they will start off Jihaad Campbell at one position, let him learn one position first, ease him into it at the NFL level. There's enough to adjust to at this level, and then put more on his plate. But eventually, I think his ceiling, like year 2, year 3, year 4, the Eagles are going to truly want to use Jihaad Campbell everywhere. Like, I don't want to say he's an edge rusher. He's an inside linebacker. He's going to do it all. He's going to rush from the edge. He's going to rush from the inside as a blitzer. And guess what? I think he's going to be in pass coverage as well. I was really amazed. Yes, his strong suit is affecting the quarterback. Going after, whether it's from the inside or on the edge, going after the quarterback is Jihaad Campbell's strength. But I watched a lot of reps that were impressive, where Campbell is dropping back in coverage and using that length and speed, that pursuit. He was able to close off passing lanes really quick in zone coverage. Like, I don't want him one-on-one with athletic tight ends or slot receivers. Like, that's not Jihaad Campbell's game. Like, he's a little stiffer in the hips for, he's not a coverage linebacker in its truest definition, but as a zone coverage linebacker where you're covering an area of the field with that wingspan and that 4.5 speed, he's 6'3"? He can do that too. He can be an elite inside linebacker. So I don't want to say he's one or the other. He's going to be everything. Now, what do I think he should start off as? I think an inside linebacker. I do think he needs more development as a true edge rusher when it comes to winning against tackles in different ways. I also think he's a little bit undersized for an edge rusher. I think he is best rushing the quarterback when he is set in the middle of the field, when he can set up linemen in the middle of the field, crashing downhill, when the linemen don't know what direction he's taking. He can, those two ways, those two-way abilities to rush the passer, I think that's where he's best, and I do think he's underrated in coverage. So I do think with Nakobe Dean's injury, he is going to start off as an inside linebacker. But again, I don't want to just say that's what he's going to be at the next level. Like he's going to do it all. And I think versatility just overall in this Eagles draft class was the theme. And I love that. I can't wait to follow Jihaad Campbell this offseason and how Vic Fangio is going to use him. It's so exciting. Again, I've never got to cover a player like this in Philadelphia, and I can't wait. Positionless football, that's my favorite. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, winners and losers of the 2025 Eagles draft. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast, we are brought to you by Gametime. There's nothing like the atmosphere in an NBA playoff game. Every bucket, every defensive stop, every moment just feels massive. It's electric in the arena, and with Gametime, you can be part of it without the stress of last-minute ticket hunting. Gametime makes it fast and easy to get playoff tickets, and even when demand is sky high, prices on the app actually go down as tip-off gets closer, and their last-minute deals can save you up to 60%. Gametime helped me get to a Cavaliers-Knicks playoff game last year. The atmosphere was incredible, and on top of getting a great price, I also knew that I was going to get a great view because they have a panoramic view of your seat before you buy. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, thanks as always for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Time now for draft winners and losers from the Philadelphia Eagles 2025 draft class. Got some players on this list, got some coaches, got some fans as well. I'll tell you what I mean by that later on in the show. A big winner in this draft class for the Eagles is defensive tackle Moro Ojomo. So they did draft Ty Robinson, the Nebraska defensive tackle, in the 4th round. I do like Ty Robinson. I think he is athletic. He's 6'5". The speed to power rush moves on the inside are really impressive. I think he's got a really high motor. I think he can be a really good role player for what he's going to be, a 4th guy in a rotation that can get to the quarterback on 3rd down. He had 7 sacks last year for Nebraska. I think it's a good player for the 4th round. I wanted Deion Walker. I probably would have stayed in the 3rd round and took a different interior rusher at the time. But I like the role that they filled with Ty Robinson. But considering the first defensive tackle the Eagles drafted was in the 4th round, and it is Ty Robinson, who I don't think has nearly the ceiling of a Moro Ojomo, I think that's a huge win for Moro heading into his 3rd year. I think that showed the Eagles have a lot of confidence in Ojomo. If they would have sold the farm to go up and get Walter Nolan out of Ole Miss, if they would have took a defensive tackle like an Omar Norman Lott in the 2nd round, or whoever would have fell to 64 instead of Andrew Makuba, I think that would have been your hint that they see Ojomo more as a 3rd or 4th guy in a rotation rather than a 2nd guy. But I think them waiting until the 4th round shows, yeah, they understood they need more depth. They need more pass rush in that rotation after losing Milton Williams and not sure what Jordan Davis is going to do at the next level. But I think it tells us that they think Ojomo is going to take a huge step this year. And he already took a massive step last year. He was top 15 in pass rush win rate. He was one of the most efficient one-on-one pass rushers on the interior. So if you're telling me in year 3 he's not going to get even better, I think you're crazy. I think the Eagles agree with that statement. And that's why they waited until the 4th round to add an interior pass rusher. So I think Moro Ojomo is a big winner of this draft. Another big winner for similar reasons is Kelee Ringo. The Eagles did not draft any sort of competition on the outside. Now, they drafted Mac McWilliams on day 3, a UCF corner that's undersized. I think he projects more to the slot. That doesn't really impact Kelee Ringo. As long as this kid can beat out Adoree Jackson, a 30-plus-year-old Adoree Jackson that I think is a little long in the tooth, right? That's the saying, right? Long in the tooth? Yeah. I think as long as he can beat out Adoree Jackson, Ringo's the guy. The Eagles have shown confidence in Kelee being the full-time starter this year. They did not re-sign Isaiah Rodgers. They did not bring back Darius Slay. There was some speculation that maybe they could go corner early in the draft, earlier than we think. Even speculation about them taking one at 32, maybe in the 2nd round, maybe in the 3rd round. They didn't do it. And the only corner they took, I think, is more of a replacement for Avonte Maddox as slot depth behind Cooper DeJean. I don't think Mac McWilliams presents really legit competition for Keely Ringo. So I think Ringo is a big winner as well for similar reasons as Moro Ijoma. Another big winner is Vic Fangio. I mean, look at what the Eagles did. They drafted a Swiss Army knife on defense, their first pick, who played mostly inside linebacker. The Eagles never draft inside linebackers that high, but Vic Fangio has had such an impact on Howie Roseman. He's had so much success with the Eagles in just 1 year that they really respect his opinion and respect what he needs on this defense, and he has changed Howie Roseman's philosophy. And he got a creative, just do-it-all kind of player. He can have a field day with Jihaad Campbell, and he got Andrew Makuba in the second round, a safety. Howie Roseman hasn't spent a second-round pick on a safety since Jaquan Jarrett out of Temple back in 2011. So Vic Fangio's impact, I talked about it on the show Friday night, his impact with Howie Roseman and the Eagles is massive. It had Howie go linebacker safety with his first 2 picks and corner last year in the first 2 rounds. So his last 4 picks in the first 2 rounds have been 2 cornerbacks, a safety, and a linebacker. That's the Vic Fangio impact on the Philadelphia Eagles. Another winner, Jeff Stoutland. All 3 offensive linemen that the Eagles took on day 3 have some legit traits. At tackle, at center, at guard. They're versatile. They're big. They're athletic. And Howie Roseman said, let's get as many talented, maybe they're a little bit more raw kinds of players. Let's get those guys into Stoutland University and have him develop them. And the great thing is these offensive linemen, these rookies coming in, they have the luxury of getting to sit and develop behind the best offensive line in football. And you still have some other experienced depth pieces as well. Tyler Steen, Kenyon Green, who you traded for in the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson trade. You've got Darian Kennard as well at tackle to maybe replace Fred Johnson. Hopefully one of these 3 rookies, I love Kendall. I think Drew Kendall from Boston College could be a starter. Maybe one of the tackles could be a primary backup, but they don't have to be. You could just let those kids just develop. Williams and McNeil, I think those guys can be legit depth long term, but for right now, they can kind of just be a mold, a ball of clay that Howie Roseman eventually molds. So I think, you look at those guys, Cameron Williams especially out of Texas, I think he was a steal on day 3. I think if he stayed, Fran Duffy said it, and I went back and watched some of Williams' tape, and I agree. If he stayed 1 more year, considering his traits, he could have been a day 1 or day 2 pick next year. And Miles Hinton, I was thinking of a different player. Miles Hinton, when you look at that size, 6'7", over 300 pounds, the way he can move up to the second level is kind of incredible. So I think Jeff Stoutland got 3 legit players with a lot of upside on day 3. So I think he came out as a big winner. And I think all of us that wanted the Eagles to bring back Dallas Goedert, we were big winners this weekend as well. And according to Ian Rappaport, the Eagles do want to make it work with Dallas Goedert. Now, there's no guarantee that's going to happen. I think Goddard probably still wants a contract extension. He wants guarantees and at least this final year of his current deal. There's no guaranteed money left. The Eagles want him at a lower number, so there's still work to be done to find a middle ground, but the Eagles did not draft a tight end this year. They didn't even draft a pass catcher. They did not draft a single wide receiver or a single tight end. So for us that wanted Goddard back in 2025, we're big winners. And they could still trade for a Michael Mayer or a Luke Musgrave or somebody that we're not thinking of. But I think the best case scenario now for the Eagles is to make sure they have Goddard back at least for 1 more year. I think they know they can't go into the season with Grant Calcaterra as their starting tight end. I just don't think that's good enough. I think they know that. They got to make it work. Even if it's guaranteeing some money this year, I don't know. Maybe it is extending him to a long-term contract. I doubt that's going to happen, but find a way to make it work. Hopefully Goddard would be willing to play in the right scenario on this final year of his deal. Even at 30 with his injury history, maybe he'd be willing to. I hope they can make it work because the Eagles, especially after not taking a tight end, they need Dallas Goedert in 2025. I will not be happy now if he is not on this football team. I will not be happy. All right, guys, coming up next right here on the Locked On Eagles podcast, losers of the 2025 NFL Draft. We'll get into that as we wrap up this Monday edition of Locked On Eagles. Today's episode of the Locked On Eagles podcast is brought to you by Nissan. The Armada pick of the week is brought to you by our friends at Nissan and the all-new 2025 Nissan Armada. This week we're highlighting the top pick from our draft, the one selection that truly stood out, the guy who showcased the strength and power to push the Eagles forward as we look ahead to the 2025 season. That is Jihaad Campbell out of Alabama. This guy is heavy-duty, rugged. He conquers the road. He can go left to right, sideline to sideline. He has the explosiveness, the length, the hit power, the pass rushing ability, the underrated coverage skills to be a star at the NFL level. When it comes to the Nissan Armada, they say go forth and conquer, and that's exactly what I think Jihaad Campbell is going to do in Philadelphia. It's clear that our top pick of the draft is out here ready to conquer the road ahead with confidence, just like you can in the all-new Nissan Armada or any of their outstanding vehicles. Take the Nissan Armada, Rogue, or Pathfinder and go find your next big adventure. Shop nissanusa.com today. All right, wrapping up this Monday edition of the Locked On Eagles podcast, getting into some losers of this draft. There's not a lot of guys that came out with their stock being lowered from this draft class, but I think there are at least a few guys. And I think the biggest loser actually is Sidney Brown, the Eagles' third-round pick from the 2023 draft. I think after trading Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, there was hope that Sidney Brown could be that guy to fill his shoes. And a lot of reporters said the Eagles want to give Sid a chance to play more. Howie Roseman himself said, we got guys at that position that haven't really got an opportunity to play as much as we'd like. And he was referencing Sidney Brown. But I also was skeptical of that. I felt like the Chauncey trade was less about, I think the Eagles letting Darius Slay go and letting Isaiah Rodgers go, that had a lot. Most of that had to do with wanting Kelee Ringo to get an opportunity to win the job and clearing the way for him. Kind of like last year, the Eagles letting Hassan Reddick go, clearing the way a little bit for Nolan Smith to go take that job. I think with Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, it was more about not wanting to pay him a top-tier safety contract, and I think they knew a contract dispute was coming from CGJ. Whereas with corner, like I said, it was all about Ringo clearing the way. I don't think it was like that with Sidney Brown. And I did not feel like Vic Fangio trusted him last year. I couldn't imagine Fangio was going to be satisfied with Sid being the one main answer to replace Gardner-Johnson. I thought maybe they'd sign Justin Simmons this week in free agency, but they drafted a safety in the second round in Andrew Makuba, who is very similar to Gardner-Johnson. A lot of what the Eagles loved in CGJ is what Makuba brings to the table. And again, Howie has not drafted a safety with one of his first two picks in 14 years. That's a significant investment. So if you don't think Makuba's coming in as the favorite to start, I think you're crazy. So Sidney Brown, I don't want to say he lost his starting job. Like, I guess there's a scenario he could beat out Makuba if Brown just has a great offseason, and Makuba could be that third safety rotating in. But Makuba's now the heavy favorite to start next to Reed Blankenship. So I think Sid definitely came out as a loser in this class. But I will say, I still think there's a role for him this year. I do want to see Brown as that third safety that comes down into the box, like use that range, that speed downhill, that hit power. In certain situations, you can use him in the right situations that can allow him to be a positive rotating player on this defense. And I do want to see more three safety looks this year. I want to see more defensive pack heavy packages, especially with Nakobe Dean out a little bit. Yeah, you have Jihaad Campbell now you're going to want on the field, but I would like to see packages where Reed Blankenship's out there and Andrew Makuba and Sidney Brown with Quinyon Mitchell, Kelee Ringo, and Cooper DeJean. So I still think there's a role for Sid. I think they'll use more three safety looks than they did last year. But at the same time, Makuba coming in, that's a big hit to Sid's starting stock. So I don't think he'll come into training camp with the first team. And then another loser from this draft is Nakobe Dean. And I don't think it's to the degree of Sidney Brown. With Jihaad Campbell coming in, again, Jihaad's not going to be a full-time stand-up linebacker next to Zach Bond. I don't think he's going to be a full-time edge rusher either. Like I said, they are truly going to use him all over the field. But I will say, I think Jihaad Campbell is going to start off at linebacker. I do think his ceiling in the NFL is an elite do-it-all inside linebacker that can rush the quarterback as well. And if he reaches that ceiling, that potential that he showed at Alabama at this position that he's played more than any since coming to the Crimson Tide, that's not good for Nakobe Dean's future. in Philadelphia because Nakobe's coming off a serious injury, and he was great last year. I think he was the most underrated player on the Eagles defense last year. Maybe you could make the argument Nakobe Dean was the most valuable, underrated value player based on his leadership off the field as well, how good he was against the run. He was very underrated in coverage. He was the most underrated glue guy from that championship team. But again, he had the injury. That's going to leak into the season, I think. He's also going into a contract year. The Eagles paid Zach Bond a top 5 contract at a position they normally don't pay. Now they spent a first-round pick on a player that has shown elite traits at that spot. Nakobe Dean, do we think they're going to pay him? They could. Howie said that the Jihaad Campbell pick has nothing to do with their confidence in Dean, but I wouldn't be so sure that they're going to bring him back after next year. This is a big year for Nakobe. So I think his stock was hurt by the Campbell pick. And I also would say Jeremiah Trotter Jr. comes out as a loser a little bit here. And I think he's shown a lot of promise. I think he's going to end up playing a lot when Nakobe Dean's out to start the year. But they brought in, again, Jihaad Campbell's an inside linebacker. He's played that position a lot. They also brought in Mondin from Georgia, Ismail Mondin is a super athletic player that has a high floor, has a high ceiling, has the traits. He's one of the most explosive players in this draft. So for Jeremiah Trotter Jr. too, his stock took a little bit of a hit. And the Eagles needed linebacker depth badly. Trotter Jr. and Bond were the only 2 healthy inside backers heading into the offseason activities. So they needed to bring in guys. So it's not like this is now make or break time for Dean and Trotter. But both players the Eagles drafted at linebacker have some ridiculous traits and a really high ceiling. And that, I just think, naturally hurts the stock of the players you already had at that position, especially one in Dean that's going into a contract year. I'd say one more loser from this, Jalen Hurts. Only because the Eagles did not draft a single pass catcher in this draft. And I do think they should have addressed the depth at receiver, at tight end a little bit more. I would have liked in a really good tight end class that they came away with a player. I would have liked Gunnar Helm in the 3rd round. I would have just stayed put at 96 and took Gunnar Helm, who went a little bit later to the Tennessee Titans in round 4. I know nobody fell to them in round 2, and I like the safety pick anyway. I'd rather have Makuba than another tight end. But I would have liked them to do something. Even if they took Ricky White out of UNLV in round 7, bring some speed to the wide receiver position. I think to bank on Johnny Wilson being that primary backup to your top 3, or Aniyah Smith, one of your 2 guys from last year's draft class, I'm still a believer in Johnny Wilson's traits, and Aniyah Smith did improve as the year went on, but I think it was kind of crazy to not bring anybody in. The good news is, though, we still have free agency, and now it won't count against the comp pick formula for next year. So I think Howie Roseman will be active this week in free agency. Last year at this time, he signed Mekhi Becton. 2017, he brought in LeGarrette Blount at this time. James Bradbury came in around this time in 2022. So we'll get into tomorrow some players that Howie could bring in free agency this week. But that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. Thanks so much for making Locked On Eagles your first listen each and every day. Make sure your second listen is the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast. The NFL draft is over, but the roster moves and the news never stops. Hosts Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan in the offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks so much for downloading, watching, and listening, and let's go Birds. Fly, Eagles, fly.